Hey everyone, and welcome to Tony for Best of the Worst. Tony for you. I've been in the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona community for a while now, and have played pretty much every game this series has to offer so far. With that, I have a lot of opinions on what games are great and what games are not so great. My first ever video on the channel was even a where to start for the series. I'm a pretty positive guy, so I haven't really talked about the games I dislike much, but that can be fun too in its own right. So today I'll bring you the 3 games I think exemplify what the series does the best, and 3 games I think are some of the worst games I may have ever played. Don't let anyone tell you this series doesn't have its highs and lows. I'll have some controversial picks on the list, and by no means is this meant to disparage you if you really love some of the games I put in my bottom 3, and also since I made a top 5 SMT games, it won't be just a repeat of the top 3 of that. More so, this is a symbolic list meant to show the overall strengths of the games within the series itself, and also the weaknesses. Without any further ado, let's talk about some of the best and worst SMT has to offer. Starting off with the 3rd best game the series has to offer. It's actually a package deal. It's the Digital Devil Saga series, which is absolutely awe-inspiring. Even compared to other JRPGs on the PlayStation 2, which are some stiff competition by the way, it stands head and shoulders above them, in terms of size, narrative complexity, and scope. This was a blessing and a curse however, since there were only 2 games in the series released. But some of you may know that it was actually meant to be 3 to complete a massive trilogy, with the first being the setup of the world, the second being the intrigue, and the third being the ultimate climax. Sadly, the publisher approached the developers and pretty much forced them to wrap the entire series up in 2 games. Despite this, some fantastic works of art came out of it. A smart man once said, "To achieve great things, 2 things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time." The world is a post-apocalypse inhabited by warring tribes. At first, what seems to be a fairly simple, low-scale skirmish blows up to be the main group being branded by a strange meteorite, bestowing them with the ability to transform into demons. Each unique form granting overwhelming strength, but also an intense bloodthirst. Eventually, they stumble upon a black-haired woman named Sarah, whose song is able to soothe their bestial nature and allows them to push forward for answers. What could possibly cause such changes in humanity? Who or what is responsible for it, and how can they escape this infinite hell? If that sounds at all interesting to you, please play the games, and also keep in mind that this was only a summary of the first game's intro. The second game goes into elements of human consciousness, God's will upon humanity, transhumanism, and in very SMT fashion, the reshaping of the world itself. The music is some of the best in gaming history, with electronic ambience to some of the hardest metal riffs I have ever heard in my life. Eat your heart out, One More God Rejected. The DDS battle theme goes hard. The game's real-world inspirations run incredibly deep as well, and this wouldn't be a Tony for You video without me bringing up theology in some way, now would it? Each and every demonic avatar the main party and antagonists have are tied back to Hindu and Buddhist mythology with incredibly deep meanings behind each and every one, down to the first boss in the series. I even made an entire video discussing them. The games are relatively short and the difficulty is very manageable, so please give them a shot with official hardware, wink wink, until they re-release it on Steam. Hopefully soon. Now for the first of the bottom 3, let's talk about a pretty low-hanging fruit. The Majin Tensei series. Another package deal. I personally hate tactics games. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but the only ones I could really get into are the Fire Emblem games and the Devil Survivor games, also part of SMT. Even so, I've played my fair share of them. Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics, and many more of the best the genre has to offer. I can understand what makes these games great for those who are more strategically minded than myself. With that being said, however, Majin Tensei, along with being incredibly difficult for me to actually get into, has absolutely nothing of what makes this genre good. The map design, mission structure, and not least of all, the story are just awful. You may already know that there is Majin Tensei 1 and 2, but there are actually 3 games in this series. One that is a standout is SMT Rond. These games were never released in English but managed to get fan translations by some especially dedicated SMT fans. Shout out to them. I will say that despite the dedication, these games are nothing really to write home about. I would say the only redeeming qualities of the games are the music and the demon design, which actually kinda go hard. The first one is a pretty simple game where the main character fights against the Minotaur, where you travel from zone to zone facing demonic threats and acquire demonic companions. That's pretty much it. The closest equivalent I would unironically compare it to is Super Mario Bros. On the NES. The story is just an avenue for the terrible gameplay. The second game is a time travel story with multiple branches, which would seem cool at first, but doesn't really go anywhere with it. The first game actually managed to get a manga adaptation with a fairly competent plot, so it became pretty much instantly irrelevant in the grand scheme of the series. Finally bringing us to the third game in the series, Rond. Based on what you're seeing on the screen, you would be forgiven for thinking this game is either unfinished or just a joke. The plot is the main character fighting to save his kidnapped brother from the demon Moloch. At first, it may seem the plot is serviceable, but good luck actually understanding what's going on. One of the party members is even clearly just Muhammad Ali, a boxer who lost his memory and is a mathematical genius, and also an android. Angels and demons fight the world governments, and the party goes in and out of virtual space to combat the demonic threat. King Solomon is a character of Abrahamic theology, Yoshitsune and Benkei of Japanese lore, and many, many more play key roles in the plot. It will be easier to list the plot points in the game that made sense than the ones that had my head reeling from tonal whiplash. The whole game is a fever dream of esoteric topics from science to philosophy to magical powers. I'll just summarize my confusion with an excerpt from the wiki that is a pretty good summation of everything I just mentioned. Asuka, a party member in the game, is now Kupak, the legendary founder of the Incan Empire, along with the sun deity Inti, referred to as Tupac, meaning shining. They are with Nanahuatzin, who are trying to stop the Aztec priest from sacrificing the goddess Thunupa. Although they stop the priest, the ground begins shaking, and Nanahuatzin wonders aloud what the priest was trying to do. Asuka then hears the voice of Athena, stating that the humans are remembering their past lives. Waking back up, Asuka dismisses it, stating they should go back to the networks. Now, out of context, any game plot can be considered confusing, weird, and even downright stupid, but I assure you that if you play this game, you'll still understand absolutely nothing about what I just said at all. All of this is outside of the gameplay itself, and I mean, just look at it. I don't really need to explain why this is just awful. Every animation takes about 500 years to complete, and the missions are insanely difficult since one party member death means it's all over. There is an option to skip the animations, but there's loading screens between every single one of them, so that just defeats the purpose entirely. Playing this game is akin to microdosing on snake venom, but you never develop an immunity and just come out the other end half dead. It breaks my heart to think that this series got 3 games that only got worse as time went on, and Digital Devil Saga got 2 fantastic games that needed to be rushed out. I know developing games on the Super Nintendo was much easier than PlayStation 2, but still. Check the games out if you like exercises in futility. The second best game the SMT series has to offer is Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. When it comes to classic SMT games, Nocturne is my pick for pretty much a perfect experience. When you think of the elements that make Shin Megami Tensei unique, Nocturne has pretty much every single one of them. While it may not do every single one perfectly, it comes pretty darn close. The dungeon crawling is immaculate, the difficulty is perfectly balanced, and the music and atmosphere are top-notch. In this game, you play as a young boy who visits his teacher in the hospital with a group of friends. When they arrive, the hospital is eerily empty. Top to bottom, you search for signs of life, and when you make it to the bottom floor, you see a strange man named Hikawa, who attempts to take your life. But just then, your lovely teacher comes to petition for your safety. At least for now. She explains how all things will end by tonight anyway. Confused, you attempt to flee and gather your friends, but the grim prophecy comes to pass as you witness the end of the world. Instead of dying, however, you are visited by a strange duo of an old woman and a young boy who implant you with a strange demonic parasite that transforms you into the Demi-Fiend. Now in the post-apocalypse, you search for answers and ultimately shape a new world in your image depending on the choices you make throughout your adventure. Everything that makes SMT great is shown beautifully in this game. The intrigue, the world building, the choices and consequences of your actions, all beautifully done. This is a game made for people who love RPGs. It could be difficult to get into if you aren't familiar with the intricacies of the genre, but it's an unapologetically deep and complex game with multiple routes and countless demon party members you use throughout your adventure. Constantly fusing new party members is key to success, and proper use of buffs and debuffs are outright necessary for progression. The amount of people that get roadblocked by the bosses in this game is actually kind of beautiful, more of a rite of passage. Seeing people try and try again with new strategies and eventually overcoming it with knowledge and understanding is really a sight to behold. The dungeons are all unique and varied, from dilapidated office buildings to mind-bending alien constructs, and at the end of it all, you come out the other end just wanting more. I've never enjoyed losing so much in a game, because it meant I needed to flex my ingenuity and try a new strategy to overcome. The world building and atmosphere are top-notch thanks to the music too, with everything from ambient tracks to the iconic battle theme pumping you up to take some demon heads. The world has already ended, so let's cause some chaos, shall we? This is a game every SMT fan should play. No, every RPG fan should play. The second worst game in the series is a controversial one since it's a fan favorite with countless people who haven't played it. SMT If. Widely considered to be the first Persona game when that spin-off series didn't exist yet, the game is very similar to the first ever Shin Megami Tensei games. Now, I actually really liked the first SMT game, despite its old jank and easy to break combat. The story was quite good, exploration was solid, and the music was actually really good. The second game, SMT2, while widely being considered better to most people, I actually liked a little bit less. The puzzles and exploration can be incredibly frustrating, and the story is a bit less nuanced in its execution. In fact, most of SMT2 is just running back and forth between 2 points of the map over and over again. Its unique topics of philosophy and subplot points are a real highlight for me though. SMT If, however, has the absolute worst of everything the first two games had to offer. This time taking place in a school having been transported to another world after being attacked by demons. Now suspended in what looks like a strange pocket dimension, there are many doors, each connected to their own dungeons and unique set of dangers. Right off the bat, you choose your route in the game immediately, depending on which party member you choose to take along with you for your adventure. With them, you go through each door to dungeons so horribly designed and frustrating to clear, it took absolutely all of my gamer grit to not close the game immediately. The standout dungeon that everyone talks about in this game is the World of Sloth. In this dungeon, you have to go to multiple dead ends and talk to NPCs that are digging tunnels. To complete this dungeon, you need to talk to each and every one of the characters digging and then run around the area for 6 entire lunar cycles. All this with an insanely high random encounter rate. Without a guide, I genuinely don't understand how people would figure this out, and even if they did, the exact time frame and characters needed to progress are unclear in every guide I looked up. There are also reports of the progress being interrupted or reset depending on if you leave the dungeon or die. Also, some people have said that the NPCs have randomly stopped digging and you need to talk to them again to reinitiate their progress. When I finished the dungeon, my mag and money were maxed out, and even with double speed, it took almost an hour of doing nothing but running around and fighting orcs. Speaking of dying in this game, there are no game overs, which you might think would make the game easier, but in reality, the reason why there are no game overs is due to the mechanic of demonic spiritual partners. When you or your human party member dies in this game, you are brought back to life through the influence of a spirit companion. The problems come into question with how each and every spirit influences your stats. Sometimes you'll get a spirit that boosts your key stats and makes your run easier. Sometimes you'll get a blob that bricks you completely. The mechanics are justified with the more you progress and beat bosses, the higher likelihood of you getting a good spirit that boosts your stats, and the more you fail, the higher likelihood of you getting a bad spirit. In reality, most people just save and reload if they get bad spirits. In my playthrough, however, I was stuck with low-tier demons that lowered my main stats and boosted random ones. I never got a good one, no matter how many bosses I killed between dying. The route system in this game, something that's uniquely loved about the Shin Megami Tensei series, is also abysmal. Since the route is directly tied to the companion you choose and not at all to do with the choices you make throughout the game, this breaks what made SMT 1 and 2 so great and nuanced in their storytelling. And you have pretty much no way of knowing which route is which, and even if they did, the game is pretty much the exact same. The only thing that changes between them is the final dungeon. Actually, that's not entirely true. There's one route that's different, and even kind of cool, and that's the Akira route, who, incredibly enough, is locked behind New Game Plus. There's so much more to rant about with this game and how awful it is, from the bosses to the myriad other dungeons that are just as bad, if not worse than the World of Sloth, but I'll leave it at that. Don't get tricked into thinking this game is like SMT 1 and 2. It's really not. My pick for the absolute best game in the series is One Strange Journey on the DS. A more recent game in the grand scheme of things, and one that blew me away when I first played through it. I came into it with pretty low expectations since it's just a handheld game, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The game starts with a world-shattering event. In the South Pole, a strange phenomenon known as the Schwarzwelt occurs. Akin to a black hole, the solid dark sphere surrounding the area is constantly expanding as the world goes into chaos. Seemingly as a reaction to the erosion of society, the black hole grows. As crime and civil unrest grow, so does the Schwarzwelt. Shortly after, a united coalition forms to study the strange happening. They get the best and brightest of the world's military personnel to gather all they can about it. That's where you come in, a highly competent soldier of the US or Japanese military, depending on the version you play, takes part in a mission to infiltrate the growing darkness with a large team of scientists, infantry, and scouts. Starting off well as you suit up with a highly advanced armor and go through a psych evaluation, but when the mission actually starts, it all goes downhill fast. Where there was once hundreds of you, only a few survive. As of right now, you only know that your ship made it across the event horizon. Even after the chaos subsides, members of your crew start dropping dead from invisible enemies. A strange program is then installed onto your armor's interface, and you can see the entire Schwarzwelt is infested with demons. Taking up arms, you try to salvage what's left of your crew and fight back against the demonic horde. What an intro to a game. I was never so hooked with an RPG in my life. First of all, you play as a highly competent soldier rather than an average teenage boy, which is nice. Not only that, but you had a great reason to start the adventure, which is that it was your duty to save your country, and even the world. But you also have a reason to keep going, which is that it's your only option left. Exploring the tundra, you eventually find out there are multiple areas of this demonic plane that are all ruled by a demonic overlord. Each plane meant as a crude imitation of humanity's sins. And depending on the choices you make throughout the game, you become the savior of all mankind or the agent of their ultimate destruction. In Strange Journey, the demons you party with have to be chosen a lot more intricately when compared to other SMT games. Your alignment is shown throughout the game as the color of your character's name. Depending on your alignment, the demons you fight alongside will be more or less inclined to help you, in this game with the demon co-op system. When you hit the enemy's weakness, if your demon companions are of the same mindset, they'll capitalize on the opening and deal extra damage. But if they are indifferent or even opposed to you, they'll ignore your tactics, leaving you hanging. This leads to every playthrough being different and the game feeling a lot more alive than the previous titles. For Law, you have angels and heroes of legend, Chaos has demons and evil spirits, and Neutral has forces of nature as well as Japanese kami. This actually goes a very long way in setting up the believability of the story. You can't just be a complete agent of chaos being followed by nothing but angels who follow God's word, or be the nicest guy ever trying to save humanity being followed by nothing but demons that would torture you to death in an instant. You all need to be on the same page in order to achieve your goals, much like a real adventuring party. It's also important to note that Atlas didn't develop this game, but just publish it. Rather, it was made by Lankars, who were the team behind Etrian Odyssey 1 and 2. This led to the game being a lot more focused on pure dungeon crawling in a first-person view. The characters are all incredibly well written, and I would consider this game to have some of the best overall narrative design in the entire series, with almost every character being very competent and important to the story, while also having some very adult and dark themes at times. The alignment representatives are believable in their descent into extremism, since there's barely anything left of humanity or even your own crew left to save. Will you ally with the demons or stay strong with humanity? Or leave it all behind and revel in the chaos? The choice is yours. Each zone has unique visuals and ways the party must traverse it. You really feel like you're part of a team struggling to survive this hellish landscape. The music is also top-notch with booming orchestral sound, and you can really tell this was pushing the DS sound chip to its limits. I don't want to talk too much more about the game because I just want people to play it. Just please don't play the REDUX version. Based on my previous sentence in the best game segment, you may be able to guess what my pick for the worst SMT game is. It's a controversial one, but my pick for the absolute worst SMT has to offer is Strange Journey REDUX on the 3DS. How bad could it be, you may ask? It's just a remaster of the first game you love so much. Well, it isn't the core of the game that's bad, but it's the fact they took what was great about the original and defaced it almost beyond recognition. Many people were conned into playing this game instead of the original, not knowing the additions they made to it did nothing but destroy what made the original so great in the first place. The grounded narrative based on the survival of a small group of capable individuals gets transformed into a stupid time travel story introducing a new character that knows the future. The intrigue of if you can even make it through the hellish landscapes unscathed is watered down to a countdown to if the Deus Ex Machina remaster girl will let you progress with the plot or be a long-winded roadblock to progression. To now go into spoiler territory, the endings of the first game are incredibly nuanced. The Law ending sees humanity coalesced into a hive mind worshipping God and seeing an end to crime and needless bloodshed under one unified religion. The Chaos ending sees most of humanity die out as survival of the fittest reigns supreme. Humans must ally with the demons and grow their individual strength to survive. The Neutral ending sees you end the Schwarzwelt, but the peace is only temporary, as long as humanity continues down the chaotic path, the demons will eventually return. All endings have their strengths and weaknesses. No path is perfect, but those are the ones you're given. Well, the Redux version of the game introduces a new character called Alex, who is an inhabitant of the world you made if the path you go down continues to the endings of the first game. Depending on which alignment you are at any given time, she'll appear and tell you that the world you are about to create is a horrible one that leads to suffering, and she will attempt to kill you. After fighting her back, you eventually learn of the world she comes from and endeavor to create a perfect utopian version of whatever ending you would have gotten, but without any nuanced drawbacks to the extremism. This, on the surface, would make the endings and story of the game more rewarding, but in actuality it totally destroys the original game's vision. You and your team are survivors of a horrible accident and band together to piece the world back together you once knew. No matter what you chose, the world will never be without conflict and downsides, but it's these downsides that either strengthen or destroy your resolve. Perfect worlds are not realistic, and in reality downright childish to consider. The adult themes of the first game are consistent and rewarding to those who brave the path they chose despite the downsides. There's no friction if the path you go down is perfect, it's just a race to the end. Both Law and Chaos lead to worlds where humanity prospers with demons, just different flavors of them. The only interesting ending is the new Neutral one, where the character becomes essentially an immortal doom guy living on the moon, ending the demonic threat whenever it appears on Earth. The new additions to the game change the scrappy fight for survival to an uninspired save-the-world story with superficial choice where the only outcome is a great world where everyone is happy and no deep philosophical interpretations can be had. These are just my gripes with the narrative additions. This isn't even to mention the way they butchered the art style with this weird glossy look and the music with horrible remixes. The gameplay is also extremely watered down with all difficulty and friction removed, with new tech options that add to your suit, basically enabling easy mode. Gone are the punishing mechanics, now it's just an easy ride to the finish line. I wouldn't hate this game as much if I didn't absolutely adore the original. The reason why it's the worst SMT has to offer is simply because it took what was great from another company and ruined it completely, with the vast majority of the SMT community falsely assuming it's the optimal way to play it. I've been in countless conversations with people that claim not to really like Strange Journey, yet have only played Redux. It's not their fault. They were given the choice between the old version and a new version, not knowing just how different they are. Atlus took another company's work and defaced it just enough to ruin it, but not enough to make it intuitively known just how different it is. It walks like Strange Journey, it talks like Strange Journey, but it isn't. It's actually a lot like that old Jesus painting restoration that went viral. You tried to make it better, but you ruined it for all future SMT fans. Forgive me for being melodramatic, but the game really means a lot to me. I put it as the best SMT game for a reason after all. So please, if you want to try out Strange Journey, play the DS one, and never even look at Redux if you can help it. Well, that covers the best and worst the SMT series has to offer. Let me know if you agreed or your own list in the comments down below, and while you're down there, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The SMT and Persona series are my favorite of all time, but it's important to think on not just what games are great, but what games are not so great as well. Special thanks to VideoGamer75, Matt M, Just a Middleman, The Digital Dutchman, Goose Kebab, Patty123, Kalos, Arctic Mirror, Jem Morales, Carehos, Paul Torrio, Masker2196, Mojo Badword, and many more for supporting the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to support, check the link in the description below. Thanks for watching this best and worst list, and I'll see you in the next Tony for You. Have a good one.